Twitter. You're live on YouTube right now.
Does splitter work?
I got no splitter, man.
Oh, I gave it to Pat to give to you.
I have not seen it.
Damn it. He said he'd give it to you.
Yeah, I haven't seen him. All right. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. If you're wondering why Scott and I are smiling and laughing, it's because it's an ongoing gag. If anybody was watching on YouTube, I don't have a splitter for my USB, so I have to unplug one thing to plug in my microphone, and Scott has been trying to get me an extra splitter that he had, and he gave it to Pat Hardy, who has not given it to me or mentioned anything about it, so we'll have to see and investigate that. Pat may be keeping it for himself, but we'll get to the bottom of this. It's Thursday, December the 15th, 9:18 a.m. Central Time. Plenty to talk about today on the Hotspot podcast. I'm a little under the weather, so probably going to throw a lot of things Scott's way so he can talk and I can recover my voice every now and then. But we are, as luck would have it, we will record next Thursday, the 23rd. Festivus Eve, so we will hold our Festivus episode until next Thursday with our grievances, and then we will also pick our Big Ten bowl games next Thursday. So a little preview for what we'll have next week before Christmas hits. But today we have plenty on the plate, Scott, and I know you've written a couple more big picture things that I'd like to kind of hit off on the top here, because we'll have plenty of time to dive into Iowa stuff. But I noticed you had a story today that I have not had a chance to read on the future of the bowl system beyond the playoff when it expands. And then you also had a piece the other day that I had a chance to kind of skim through, not read as closely as I would like to, about the Big Ten structure moving forward with divisions. We found out yesterday, not to anybody's surprise, that UCLA has been given clearance for a price to come into the Big Ten. So the wheels are moving here, and the future is not right now, but it's damn close.
Yeah, exactly. We're finally to the point now where we're exiting the cave, and we haven't run into the side of the walls. So I think we see next year is kind of the last year of what we've determined to be normalcy for about a decade, and then it kind of really changes with a playoff structure that goes from 4 to 12, and the Big Ten will go from 14 to 16. I think the last one is, and I think this will probably happen too, where Oklahoma and Texas will join the SEC probably in 2024 as well. It'll be for a major price, but it will be, and eventually they'll just say, okay, let's just get this done. It doesn't really behoove either the SEC or Big 12 to have, or the schools to have this, purgatory, if you will, for a year. So I think right now it is fascinating, though. I mean, let's talk about the Big Ten a little bit. I know there seems to be kind of this reluctance to ditch divisions. It's gone. I mean, those are not happening ever again after this year. They're gone. There's not going to be a pod system. That's gone. It's going to be everybody. You're going to cycle through as many opponents as you can. The only question is protected rivals. It's funny because, the people who kind of think of this simplistically is, well, just kick Purdue to the east and add UCLA and USC to the west, and it's all good. I'm like, but the Big Ten is bringing USC to play Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. They're not bringing them in to play Illinois, Minnesota, and Iowa. So
and TV is certainly going to have a say in all of this.
There's a reason why they're paying $8 billion over 7 years, and it all happened after USC joined the fray. So you've got that system. It's what it's going to be is you've got teams like Iowa who want to play 3 rivals every year. You got teams like Michigan who want 2. And then like Penn State, at least with the old AD, it was like we don't care to play anybody every year. Rutgers and Maryland. I mean, they kind of play each other, but they're not necessarily rivals. They got kind of brought in together, and so they're navigating that field as far as how many protected rivals should they have, and then how do you structure it. So
can it be a different amount for each team?
That's what they're looking at right now, Rob. And it's Iowa, like I said, has maybe 3, but then somebody else may have 1. Now, how do you package that in a scheduling model that's fairly balanced? That's going to be the fascinating part. And to me, what makes the most sense is a 3-6-6 method, which we've talked about before, which is everybody has 3 protected rivals, and you cycle through the other 12 teams twice over a 4-year period. Now, what you could do is, out of that 24 rivalry block, is say 10 of them are sacred. Ohio State, Michigan, Illinois, Northwestern, Iowa, Minnesota. There's about 10, and Iowa has 3 of them that really matter. And then there would be about 14 that either are they're nice. Let's say Illinois, Purdue, that's a good one, or something else like that. Or you decide, let's start this off with a bang and have USC play Ohio State over a 4-year block to start it all off. And then after the end of that 4-year period, you cycle through some of the other ones. You say, well, okay, we're good with, USC is now going to go play Penn State for 4 straight years instead of Ohio State, or and then that way it's kind of like what's going on now with the divisional structure where Indiana and Purdue are permanent, but then everybody else kind of goes through a 6-year block. And so I think that's probably the way it makes the most sense to structure this. But they still got to work through it. And right now it looks like it'll be February before it gets done.
Yeah, it's not an easy task that they have. And trying to make, 16 university athletic departments happy is hard to do. And there's going to have to be some, compromise. There's no doubt about that. And we'll see if Iowa has to compromise. And if it does, where those protected rivalries, which ones will survive to be annual, and which ones will maybe every other year, every 2 years, whatever that the case may be. I just wonder if they go away from divisions, which it looks like they will do. I wonder if they'll look for those marquee regular season matchups. I know they will, but I don't think they want to have like USC playing like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, every year, because you're taking your top 2 teams. You still want that Big Ten championship game to have some value. So I wonder if they'll structure it in a way to maybe split those up where, USC, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan play 2 of the other ones, and maybe not a third of the other one, just to kind of, because you were talking about early, Scott, you want to have some balance here. You don't want to have some schools playing all the heavyweights and then somebody getting, finishing second in the conference because they avoided all of those teams.
Yeah, and we get that sometimes now with the West. I mean, you're sometimes, like you look at this year. I mean, if Iowa plays Indiana instead of Ohio State, maybe they're in Indianapolis,
And Purdue didn't play Michigan or Ohio State, did they?
Right. They played Penn State and lost that, but they didn't play Michigan, except in the championship. So, I mean, what you do is you look at, and I've talked to one person in the Big Ten who said, look, the one thing we want to avoid most of all out of any of this is 3 undefeated teams. You never want to get to that part. And so you got to have some sort of crossover type, making sure that there's somebody's playing somebody who's playing somebody to ensure that never happens. Now, let's take USC, for instance. Protected number 1, of course, will be UCLA. That's going to happen, and that should happen. But then there's nobody else that really jumps out and says, well, they need to play them every year. But over a 4-year block, they could. So maybe they say, let's have you play Nebraska for a 4-year block and Ohio State over a 4-year block. And then structure your schedule where you're still going to play Michigan twice, you're still going to play Penn State twice, but make sure you're not playing them in the same years. That maybe it's you're playing Ohio State and Michigan, then the next year Ohio State and Penn State, kind of fluctuated that way. Or now they didn't do that with Nebraska. They just said, Delaney just said, you're playing everybody and you're going to get thumped right away. But I think they played in their first year or two. They played Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Wisconsin was really good because they had Russell Wilson. Ohio State, Michigan was in the same division. So they just threw the think at them, which was kind of funny. But no, I think that's probably the case. And then, you examine Iowa's. It makes perfect sense who they want to play. Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Nebraska. But the league priority would be, well, Minnesota is the fourth oldest rivalry in the league. It's for one of the most iconic trophies in the league. They've played every year since 1931. It would be stupid and be contrary to everything it represents to throw that one out. Nebraska, Iowa has built a lot of equity on Black Friday. Even though like this year, the ratings went down a little bit, but it was on BTN, which won't happen anymore. And Nebraska needs a rival too. Nebraska has a say; they're a vested member, so it'll probably be that one, number two. And then if they could squeeze in Iowa, Wisconsin, they will. And so that might be set permanently, or like, hey, we're going to continue to try to get Iowa, Wisconsin. If one of you guys falls off or something really happens, then maybe we'll have to cycle you out once. But then there's other, you want to make sure that no team has to play like 6 heavyweights in a given year, but you also want to make sure that everybody plays who they consider very, very important. So it's going to be about February before it's all finalized. It doesn't have to be finalized very quickly, but I think it's going to work out. And again, I think the 3-6-6 method is the best way. Everybody gets 3 protected for a 4-year block, and then you play everybody else twice over that same time period. So then, you don't have to, because, the one thing I think everybody agrees with here and probably everywhere is you don't want to play Rutgers more than Wisconsin, and Penn State, maybe, that's a weird one because they've had permanent rivalries in the past with Michigan State and Ohio State. I don't know what they feel like. I know Michigan's, that one's kind of spackled together, Michigan State, even though it gets good ratings and it's usually a competitive series. But, but they also have
the Governor's Trophy?
That's that's the land grant trophy.
Okay. I know it was something that nobody cares about.
Yeah, that's like, looks like a pipe organ. It's kind of like one of the sickos trophies, They've got the Governor's Victory Bell with Minnesota, which a few years ago Minnesota won that and it broke it to pieces, which is fitting, I think. But they have a lot of broken trophies up there. But except Floyd, he does go up there except to visit. But so it's all fascinating to me because and then there's some other parts I didn't really get into, but they're going to look for a way to get week 0 involved in the scheduling every year. Right now you have to either play an FCS opponent to move it there. You have to play a team either like Hawaii or a team that plays Hawaii to get it in week 0, or you have to play internationally. And I think right now what they're looking at, especially with having CBS, NBC, Fox, BTN, they would really like to have multiple games on week 0 because it is kind of a high visibility week. I mean, look at the Nebraska and Northwestern game. Do you think if that's in November 13th that it gets any kind of rating at all? But it got 4.5 million viewers, not just because they were in Ireland, but because it was football on that first weekend. So I think if maybe Iowa and Wisconsin should move theirs up and play in Munich or something like that. Have a early Oktoberfest. But so anyway, I think that's probably, another part of what they're going to do. And then, of course, beginning next year, Saturday night throughout the month of November, that's going to be a part of it.
That's going to be cold is what that's going to be. From somebody who's on the field shooting photos, that's the first thing that pops in my mind. We'll obviously talk a lot more about this, but check out Scott's piece at The Athletic, give you kind of some insight into what we're looking at, potential outcomes come February when they figure this all out and are getting ready to announce it. And we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, Scott, your piece today on the future of the bowl system with the playoff expanding. And I think you have a really good example of some of the pitfalls, so to speak, with this year's Music City Bowl. Mm-hmm. And those of us who follow Iowa, media fans, understand the dynamic here, where Iowa is playing a quarterback that's never taken a college snap, and Kentucky is without its top quarterback, who's preparing for the NFL draft, and Will Levis, its starting running back, and who will be in the NFL. Chris Rodriguez is not playing. Iowa's missing one of its best receivers in Arlen Bruce. Keegan Johnson is also gone, but he hasn't contributed this much. Those that are listening to this understand kind of who's in and who's out for this game. But I think this is kind of a microcosm of what we're looking at across the country moving forward.
Oh, exactly. And I think, and this isn't unique, but it's a great example of what bowls are facing now. I mean, I talked to the Sun Bowl executive director, and they were the first one to really deal with an opt-out in Christian McCaffrey about 5 or 6 years ago. And it was devastating to them at the time. And now they just kind of feel like, well, this is just the way it is. I mean, they have Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh's quarterback, hit the transfer portal. And so just like with Iowa, you're starting with their number 3 quarterback against Kentucky's number 2 quarterback, and a defensively focused game. Let's be kind. But
I think people will watch the game.
Yeah.
People are going to watch it, and especially Iowa and Kentucky fans are going to watch it. But when you're trying to market it and say, the best players on this team are going to be, we see it every weekend, NFL, college, when they promote the games on TV, there's photos of the stars in that game. When the stars are out, that takes something away from it.
It does. And this is the part of the messaging. I talked to an executive at ESPN who handles a lot of this. And part of the messaging is you almost got to turn your head and say, this isn't about a conclusion to this season as much as it is a preview to the next season. Because when you have players hitting the portal and you have players opting out for the NFL, or injuries that are forcing players to step away for, on their own initiative or just because of the injury, then you've got to say, well, this is the team that you're going to have next year. And here's a good chance to kind of look at and watch them grow. And there are commissioners, Jim Phillips with the ACC being one, who are really focused on saying, let's eliminate the eligibility concerns for the red shirts, that they're all eligible for this game, because that way it's kind of a reward for making it through the season. But then when you do have teams like, I think it's, now Miami isn't going to a bowl game, but they have 17 guys in the portal. Texas A&M has more than 20. They're not going either. But Ole Miss has double digits, and all these teams have double digits. And it's like, you're down, you're depleted to, they never want to get to a situation where we can't play. We only have 43 players or something with all this type of stuff. So that's a smart way for the Bulls to kind of do it. Now, in other ways they're going to have to figure out NIL and how do they pay, do you pay the players outright from the bowl fees, or do you look at ways to do it? I mean, to me, I think a no-brainer is, why not the day before or 2 days before the game, you have a big autograph session with all the players? They all get paid. They all show up, stuff like that. Or, appearance fees. How many times have, Iowa gone to some children's hospital or something in Tampa or wherever? Now they should get an appearance fee for that, and not just through their collective, but through the bowl. And I think a lot of that is something the Bulls are going to have to think about. And, but the other part is, and why is it viable? I think there's a couple of areas where there's some concerns. One is when you expand from 4 to 12, right now there's kind of that, I've used purgatory already today, but I'll use it again. Purgatory for, teams like 5 through 8-ish or 9-ish, where they didn't get in, like in Alabama. They didn't get in the playoff. That's their expectation. They're going to the Sugar Bowl, which, for Kansas State, their opponent, that's a mecca of what they wanted to accomplish. For Alabama, it's a down year. So you've got opt-outs, you've got transfers, you've got an unmotivated fan base. That's just going to shift through from teams like 13 through 18 or 19 or something like that. So the Citrus Bowl, the Outback, or formerly known as Outback Bowl, Alamo Bowl, all those bowls are going to really have to try to figure out new ways to motivate fans to go there when their team maybe lost a conference championship game or was 13th and barely missed or whatever. So that's going to be a factor. But, the flip side is that when you look at the ratings, television ratings, bowls are strong. I mean, even mediocre bowl games. I went through it last year, the first wave of bowl games on that first Saturday, which is coming up this week. They would have like great college basketball matchups, and the worst bowl game would blow away the best college basketball game. When you have the Independence Bowl that's like doubling up Ohio State, Kentucky in ratings, it just shows you that college football bowl games, people can't get enough of them. They'll watch them, even if they're just on TV. And then they'll also, bet on them. They bet on them more than they do basketball. So I think they've got to find a sweet spot. And then the other part, and we can talk a little bit about this, is the Big Ten in particular needs to figure out, a good mix between destinations and drivable locations. Destinations like a Tampa, an Orlando, Phoenix, that's fine. But like bringing Nashville aboard was really healthy for the bowl and for the Big Ten because it's drivable. And do they need to kind of figure out or navigate or discuss with ESPN or another entity of, maybe we need to try to figure out a way to get a bowl in Indianapolis or St. Louis, against the SEC or against the Big 12. And that way, when you look at a team like Iowa or Illinois or Nebraska, when Nebraska eventually becomes bowl eligible, maybe they play a Missouri or a Kentucky there, and it's drivable for everybody. And instead of, we're going to fly to, Charlotte and play this game, because as we know, where I kind of came on this when, okay, things need to change was the Pinstripe Bowl, Rob. When, I think you were out there too. There were probably 1,500 Iowa fans who traveled, maybe. There were some that lived there, but there wasn't a whole lot of excitement to spend money on a plane ticket, get a couple of nights of hotels at an expensive location to see it.
Who wants to sit and freeze their ass off for 3 hours and pay a bunch of money to do it? You can do that back here in Iowa.
Well, exactly.
Out on my deck.
Yeah. And for a team like Rutgers or Penn State or Maryland, maybe that's something that they would consider. Michigan State, where they have a lot of alums in New York City and we're not very good. You can do that once and kind of get away with it. Rutgers could do it probably every year. But if you're looking at an Iowa, it's like, well, I don't want to go there and freeze my ass off. Wrigley Field, maybe, but why not think of, and I'm just using St. Louis as an example. I mean, we froze our asses off in that game. It sucked, frankly. And they won, and they feel good about winning, and they beat a 7-5 Boston College team. But why not come to St. Louis where it's indoors and it's a drive? And people, fans would drive there. It's like, hey, 4.5 hours from, Iowa City or Cedar Rapids, and you get there. Maybe it's a hotel room for one night, maybe it's 2 nights, but that's a hell of a lot different than hopping in a plane and going to New York and spending $400 or $500 a night on hotel rooms.
Yeah, the Charlotte one didn't make sense to me when the Big Ten did. Vegas, I kind of get, and Vegas makes more sense now with USC and UCLA. The Arizona Vegas Bowls make sense because for us and the teams to the West, and if they add more teams from the West in the future, those make sense. Mm-hmm. The Floridas make sense. Obviously California is going to make sense now. Although Iowa, Big Ten's at a Holiday Bowl, maybe that switches in the future. But I'm with you. I think if you can get some locations where people can drive to that aren't like the main bowls, that's going to help you at least with attendance. And as you said, if football's on TV, people are going to watch it no matter where you're playing. You can play it in a parking lot.
Yeah, exactly. It's December 28th. It's 6:00 at night. And, let's say this year, Iowa versus Arkansas in St. Louis. People are going to watch it. People are going to watch it from the SEC. They're going to watch it from the Big Ten. They're going to watch it locally, of course, and people are going to bet on it. So, the fact that it's 7-5 versus 6-6 is really irrelevant. It's if you were to have that kind of a matchup, or, Illinois versus Missouri or Arkansas, you're going to get 45, 50 plus thousand people showing up. But now, the Charlotte Bowl, it's an every other year bowl along with the Vegas Bowl. So it's not as, that's not a bad thought, but, Maryland is a perfect fit for this year simply because it's going into its old territory, and they did it right. And the Mayo's Bowl does a great job with a lot of they're so much more ahead of the curve than every other bowl in so many different ways, from their Mayo bath to their marketing and stuff. But, it's like anything, you just, fans to travel, to spend their money, no matter what their economic situation is, you've got to give them a reason. If Iowa's a good team and they're going to Tampa, they'll flock there, or Orlando or Phoenix or Vegas. I mean, Vegas is a great location for this. But beyond that, when you've got Iowa this year, 7-5, they'll hop in the car and go to Nashville. But they're not, if they were playing in Dallas, or if they're playing New York, especially, forget about it. It's not going to happen.
No, I don't get the Fenway Park, Yankee Stadium bowl games. I get the novelty of it, but those just not December, January in those places just isn't attractive to people that are because basically people use this as vacation. Mm-hmm. It's a vacation. You don't want a vacation where you're just miserable and cold for, 3, 4, 5 days if you're going to spend money. I know you're not out, it's only one game that you're outside for, but it just doesn't seem, attractive to getting people in the seats.
Yeah. And I guess, the weather, of course, dictates, what we think about. Like with New York, I went there when Iowa State played Rutgers in 2011, I think it was. And, it was in the mid 40s. And there's an attractiveness to Christmas in New York and seeing all the sights. And if you haven't been there, I mean, New York is an amazing city. But the time when we went for Iowa, it was 21 degrees at kickoff. And then it got dark, and then it got cold, and then there was wind, and the field wasn't warm, so there was slipping all over the place. And again, if Iowa is hosting a playoff game, that is completely different. Yes. That instantly becomes the biggest game in Kinnick Stadium history. If number 7 Iowa is hosting number 10 Notre Dame or Florida or USC or whatever, that's wow. Okay. You'll freeze your ass off for a playoff. And, but for a bowl's about the experience, not as much as the game. And I think, fans will be like, I'll pass. I'll just watch it at home on my great TV.
Yeah. More and more people are doing that. I think, I talk to people that say, I'm more comfortable on my couch watching it on TV where I can use my own bathroom and, get cheaper beer. So we'll see. We'll see where this thing's head. Check out Scott's article on that on The Athletic as well. And we'll be talking about that a lot more as we work through these things in college football. But let's hop into the local discussion here. Iowa found out yesterday, would have been Wednesday, December the 14th, Eric All, former tight end for Michigan, Ohio native, is following his former roommate, maybe roommates again, Cade McNamara, the quarterback from Michigan, who, unless you've been living under a rock, know that he is joining the program as well. And so Iowa addresses one need, I would say, in quarterback in McNamara, and upgrades with a proven player at a position that it utilizes quite a bit. So you're basically, swapping out LaPorta for All. I think All has the potential to be comparable to LaPorta. He's not there yet. LaPorta is the tight end of the year in the Big Ten. But you go from losing LaPorta with, whether it's Addison Estrenga or is Stylianos even coming? I guess Stylianos is back right next year. Do we
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I guess, but we didn't see much from him this year. Johnny Jacuzzi, uh, it's obviously a really good addition, and Iowa is addressing offensive needs, and we'll talk more here about some other guys that are targets for them moving forward. Have had some guys on campus already, some guys coming to campus. Wide receiver is obviously the position of need now, and we'll get some clarity on that moving forward. But nice addition so far, Scott. 2 in and 9 out now? Is that right? 9 scholarship out with Dallas Craddock announcing this week. And Dallas is a guy who could have come back with a COVID year. Not surprising. I think the coaches probably would have taken him back as a special teams contributor, but maybe he gets a chance to be an every down player.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you look at this, I mean, there's 9 out. And I think it, in some ways, you classify the graduate transfers a little differently than the actual transfer portal guys. And I think part of this is when you look at like Dallas Craddock, he didn't get on the field to play safety other than a couple of plays, I think, in his career. And he's a graduate, and that's the most important thing, because I don't think he's going to be an NFL player. So it's like, well, okay, he got his degree. He did everything you asked him to do. Those are the stories you kind of feel good for, in his case, because now he'll probably go to a different school and have a chance to play safety, and he's got a good starter kit. Terry Roberts, that's a little different, I think, in some ways, just because it's, I think he could have come back and, if not played, he certainly would have, or started, he certainly would have played.
He and Justin Jacobs are graduates too. So all three of those guys have graduated. So,
and Alex Padilla.
They are the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys leaving Iowa will be Iowa alums,
exactly,
no matter where they go.
They got a degree from a Big Ten institution. That's something that they will use for the rest of their lives. And then there are other players like Reggie Bracey, who, we've talked about it a few weeks ago, Rob, where, players like that get to that point of crossroads, and like Dallas Craddock decided to stay and get his degree. And even though he wasn't a starter, he was a contributor and a great teammate by all accounts. But and then Reggie Bracey was the same way. But, you have that kind of fine line of, I don't have much time left, and I only have a finite amount of opportunities to play. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. Then you have, kind of the younger ones, I would say, with Keegan Johnson, Arlen Bruce, and Gavin Williams, who, for different reasons, all chose to leave. And that's the way the world works. So, one of the things I've tried to highlight a little bit, I don't know that the Iowa fan base is used to this, because some people think the sky is falling. I'm like, Iowa is just right where it is. It's exactly what's going on nationally, with this. So don't think it's unusual here. But that said, the two that are in the barn, great pickups. I mean, guys that there's no guessing other than their health. There's really no guessing to what they can do. Cade McNamara will start, and he'll be an upgrade quarterback. Eric All, if healthy, he and Luke Lachey will form one of the best tight end tandems in the country. So I think that's strong. And if you consider him less a tight end and more of a pass catcher, then Iowa has significantly upgraded, because, of course, as you said, Sam Laporta is, one of the 3 to 4 best tight ends in the country, and you're losing him. That's a significant loss. But now you've mitigated that by having somebody who has NFL caliber ability.
Yeah, no question. And as you said, this is the new normal. Mm-hmm. You lose guys mostly on the front end when the portal opens, and then you take the time during the time it's open to replenish. And that's where Iowa is right now. And they have other players coming in here to visit, and they're out recruiting on the road, have been this month, looking for other players, looking for guys that fit, looking for need to address needs. And that's just kind of the way it works. And we'll see where it goes, and we'll see what they get. And we wish the guys that are leaving well. You want to be, if you don't want to be where you're at, it's okay to move. And, that's where that's where things are at right now. And you look at it and say, why would somebody want to leave? Well, we don't know what's going through their mind. We don't know what they're thinking. We don't know, what is important to them. And you just kind of have to let them go and wish them the best. And then, from a health standpoint, with McNamara and all, you hope that they can get as healthy as soon as possible and get into the, spring ball and be able to, get acclimated to the system. I would think that the Iowa coaches have done some medical checks here to make sure that these guys are on track to be healthy. I don't think they would just bring guys in that, because we're talking NIL here too. So you're not going to invest in guys if there's the odds are, or it's a little sketchy whether or not they're going to be healthy.
You're right. Yeah. You're not going to just throw money and then, because this is really like, you just got to look at it like NFL free agency. That's really the only way you can assess it anymore. And, they do, whether it's medical checks or whatever, they do their due diligence. And I can't imagine that they would just say, yeah, sure. And really of the two, I mean, I think Eric All and his back injury is something you probably are a little more concerned with. And maybe that lends itself to, and I'm only speculating here, but maybe he doesn't compete in, pads in the spring. Maybe it's just, we're going to have you run some routes and catch some passes, but no, you're wearing a red jersey even in that. And probably the same thing with McNamara to an extent. But I think overall though, but you look at the ones that I think fans have brought up question marks. I mean, it really starts with Justin Jacobs. And it's understandable for people to have questions, because here's a player who everybody liked, everybody thought had a really good chance to do some good things at Iowa. And next year he would have kind of slipped into that I'm the man of the defense role. And he chose to leave and go to Oregon. And, did not NIL play a role? Probably. But he's also a graduate. He'll graduate Saturday, I think it is. And so he fulfilled his obligation. Now, people say, well, look at all the history here with Josie Jewell and Jack Campbell and Chad Greenway and all these others. Well, there are other motivating factors. And I think the other thing is when you have a player who has been injured, that sometimes they feel disconnected from their team a little bit and they have a wandering eye and maybe they just need a fresh start. And that's something to also consider here, which is he's not, he's been out, he's been hurt. He really thought, and I think most people believed he was going to be an NFL draft pick this spring. And then when he was out, it was like, well, you haven't really taken that step forward in game action. So, maybe this is his chance to say, all right, well, fresh start. I'm going to a good program. I'm getting a bump financially. I think you wish him well, even though there may be, I can understand the questions though, because Iowa does have a reputation in a pretty good defense.
Yes, it does. Oregon is a flashy program. A lot of bells and whistles there and success. I mean, it's been a successful program. Couple things, my thoughts on the Justin Jacobs thing. Number one is, I don't think, and this is just my opinion, I don't think it's healthy when you have former players that have a platform tweeting at the kid and his dad about nonsense that's pandering to the Iowa fan base, that creates a lynch mob type reaction to a kid that's dedicated 4 years of his life to your program. And when you look at it through this lens. Say, and this is like Scott was speculating on, I'm going to speculate on this a little bit. You look at this as free agency. And Justin Jacobs was given 4 years to this program, but you need a quarterback. So you bring in Cade McNamara and give him X number of dollars in NIL. Maybe Jacobs says, well, how am I valued in this program? I busted my ass for 4 years. Well, we don't, in our budget, in our free agency budget, so to speak, we don't have we can only give you this much. And another school says, well, we value you more than that. We're going to give you this much. That's what again, speculating. I don't have facts. I'm not throwing out dollar figures, but that's part of this landscape right now. And I don't think it's helpful for a fan base and former players to rally a fan base into trashing on kids for making decisions that help them in life. And you could say, well, the guy's tweet was complimentary and go collect the bag wherever. It was a backhanded compliment. It was a backhanded statement that got what it wanted, which was pandering to a fan base that's upset that Justin Jacobs is leaving. So boom, I'll hop down off the soapbox. Those are my thoughts on it.
You're right. And I think there's a lot of what fans have to do is take a step back. And I know it's hard, but as Iowa fans, would you want Michigan fans to do the same thing to Eric All and to Cade McNamara, who were captains, who really were important figures in this program a year ago? Now, I think most people understand the Cade McNamara situation. Just I think most people in Iowa understood Jake Rudock, going and this was before the portal and all that. But quarterbacks, there's only one that's on the field. He's going to play. But Eric All, if he's healthy, he can definitely help Michigan next year.
Oh yeah.
And he's an NFL player. He really is. He can block. He's probably as good of a blocker as they've had since Hawkinson maybe at that position. And plus he's an elite pass receiver. So I think this is a huge pickup that's kind of gone under the radar a little bit for Iowa. And for Michigan, it wounds them. It clearly wounds them. Would you want Michigan fans coming at him and the same way? No. And I think and then coming after parents to me is just gross. I just do not like that at all because, whether it's, you, me, whoever, our attachment is entirely to our kids. And so that is off limits to the nth degree. Just like if you're coming after me or you, our kids should be off limits. It's just that drives me crazy. So, and it's not a good look. And other players see that on the team. Oh, you view us as a commodity. We're just here to play football. That's it. Shut up and play football. And if we leave, we're nobodies. We're nothing. We're just, traitors or something like that. No, just let it go. Keegan Johnson had some things he needed to work through. And it's best for him to probably get a start somewhere else. And he did. No need to complain. Just say, okay, thanks. Arlen Bruce, I think, if anyone, probably did not fit in what Iowa was doing offensively, or either he wasn't the right fit for Iowa or Iowa wasn't the right fit for him. That makes perfect sense. Gavin Williams has been nothing but a stand-up young man. He fell to number 3. Hey, he's going to go. But the Justin Jacobs thing is he's a likable guy who's going to go to the NFL. And you know what? The last thing you want is for guys to talk. And then all of a sudden somebody's like, you know what? I saw the way they treated Justin Jacobs and I'm not coming here, because that will happen. Yep. That definitely happens. So, and it happens because, hey, he's from Southwest Ohio and Iowa, and players get recruited there. They talk, coaches talk, players talk. So I would just recommend from now on, just zip it, just move on and be excited about the players that are coming here, not be pissed off or degrade the ones who are leaving.
Yes. It's the new system. And I realize there's an adjustment period here for people to become comfortable with what's going on here, because it's so different than what we've grown up with and what we've seen our whole lives. But this is where we are right now. And look at, as Scott said, just look at these people as human beings, not as somebody wearing a number on Saturdays at Kinnick Stadium. They have lives. They have, family they're looking out for, and they're making what they believe is the best decision for them. We've got some other guys that are making the best decisions for them, Scott. At least they hope so. Isaac Tesla visited here last week. He is from Hillsdale College in Michigan, same school that produced Zach Van Valkenburg for Iowa. You spoke last week about how much you liked his film. I also think he would be a good fit here. Seth Anderson, who I think we talked about last week in the podcast, receiver from Charleston Southern.
Yeah.
Charleston Southern, right? He's and you kind of we're seeing with him kind of the wackiness of this. He's visiting here starting tomorrow, I believe, but Georgia Tech in his hometown of Atlanta offered him this week, and he's at Georgia Tech today. Probably an easy drive for him to do that, and then he comes in here, so he's looking over things. And then there are obviously high school recruits. Iowa, is it Terrell Washington?
Yeah, Terrell Washington.
Kind of an athlete type out of Texas who was committed to Purdue. We haven't even hit on that. Purdue has a new coach since the last time we talked, with Jeff Brown going to Louisville and Ryan Walters, the defensive coordinator for Illinois, now being at Purdue. So a lot of movement. But I was hard at work trying to replenish the roster here, and it's kind of fascinating, intriguing to see how this is all going to shake out, because it's important, because other teams are adding players. Iowa needs to continue to add players.
It is, and I think it's added two humongous pieces, and Iowa needs to add more, both through the portal and through traditional recruiting. It needs to secure its recruiting class, and there's still a big piece out there. In 6 days, you just are hoping and praying, and I'm sure he doesn't even need to fax it. They'll be there to pick it up, in person, whether it's, Terrell Washington is an athlete type who's probably more of a running back, but could fit in different spots. And then, as you said, Seth Anderson, I think would be a great fit, Flipper Anderson's son. Flipper Anderson, if any of you don't know, back in 1989, he still has the NFL single season record for receiving yards with 336 in one game for the Rams. And Seth went to Charleston Southern and excelled. He had a great year, and it was the Big South, big freshman of the year, and did some really good things. So he would be a really big fit for Iowa, and that's where having a quarterback really helps. And then Isaac Tesla, I think he can be a breakout performer too. He's big, he's physical, he does a lot of things. I know some people have poo-pooed, we're just going to go after a Division II guy, Well,
we got the same thing when Van Valkenburg came in. Whoop-de-doo, guy from a Division II school, and he's all Big Ten.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, Miami's offered, Baylor's offered, Wisconsin. He's already visited Iowa State. There's a chance to be playing against him or with him. And I do think he's capable of taking a really big step at Iowa with if not a pro quarterback, certainly an established college quarterback. And so, he visited last weekend. So Iowa's out there. I would say Iowa is making concerted efforts. And I do know that they are really evaluating a lot of offensive linemen, whether or not it's been resonated in trips or visits coming up or, whatever, they are evaluating them too. So, and then Ernest Hausman from Nebraska, because they do need a linebacker now with Justin Jacobs out, because Jay Higgins is right now the only one that's really coming back. So, they've got some holes, but I think that they've turned the corner and when it comes to the portal and said, all right, we're not just going to be passive observers and just select one little piece and that's it. I mean, they're going all in. It's a buffet, not a order.
Yes, well said. Yes. Iowa is playing the game. We all wondered and talked about last spring and summer, would Iowa play the game? It took a while to play the game. It took a while to jump in to do what it's doing now, but it is doing it. So feel good about that. Alex Washington, defensive back from Harvard, was scheduled to visit here this weekend. Unfortunately, for Iowa, not for the kid, Vanderbilt offered, and he switched up his visit this weekend from Iowa to Vanderbilt. So that's another guy whose name's been out there. We'll see where that goes if he ends up committing to Vanderbilt this weekend or continuing on with his recruitment and making it to Iowa City. I reached out to him and kind of asked if Iowa was still in the picture and did not hear back. And he had told me he was going to Vanderbilt this weekend as well. So we've had communication, but he stopped short of giving me all the information, which is good for those guys. They don't have to tell me everything.
Right. Exactly. It's just one of those things where, we've reached out to some players that haven't gotten back to us in different ways, and then other ones do. And yeah, they have a big task ahead of them. I mean, they're trying to make decisions, and they don't want to lead anybody astray necessarily. And everybody's got a different fit for you. I mean, if you're thinking about Harvard, you're a Harvard grad, and then all of a sudden Vanderbilt, which is another academic elite institution, and,
Yep.
you're playing at a high level in the SEC. That's something that you need to really take seriously. And so, whether you want to be part of DBU or, that's more LSU than Iowa, but Iowa's in that category. I think you got to take every look that you can. And maybe if it doesn't work out, there's always January or,
Yes.
so, or if while you're at Vanderbilt, you could stop by the bowl game, right? Have a layover.
Yes. Arlen Harris Jr., another guy that Iowa was involved with, never made it to Iowa. He visited here when he was in high school, but he committed to Iowa State, running back transfer, St. Louis native that went to Stanford. So that makes sense. Iowa State probably needed a running back more than Iowa did, at least at this point right now. So that made sense to me. And as we all know, although you guys don't like to hear it on this podcast, Iowa State is a very good, stable program. And I get why kids go there. Kids in state are going there more than probably they have in the past. And it makes a whole lot of sense. Matt Campbell's got a good program over there. Makes it a little bit harder on Iowa and the coaching staff to recruit, but it is what it is, as they say. So not a lot of talk about on the high school level. We talked about Terrell Washington. There are some guys that they're kind of poking around at. And I still think with the transfer portal now, Scott, I think the late signing period in February could reactivate. Remember, January used to be a big time but now where schools are like, okay, we're roster management. We're going to go for these guys in the transfer portal. We don't get them. Here are some high school kids. Cause you got to these are guys that are, along the development process in the transfer portal. They have development time behind them at other schools, but is there another guy that in the high school level that could help early? Is this kid worth investing in development wise and getting him? He's got potential. Use it that way. I'm interested to see because I think January for high school kids could be interesting too, because the transfer portal is impacting some of the guys that were, let's say late bloomers, but bloomers, kids that emerged this fall.
If I was a higher level MAC kid or higher level even FCS kid, I wouldn't sign in December at all. I would wait because, as you said, we got multiple levels here. We have the big push where we have more than 1,000 FBS players alone in the transfer portal. You have, the rush to get the higher end ones right now. You have signing period for the higher levels now, in next week. And then after the bowl games, you're going to see other players making thoughts. Maybe it's like, well, we'll stick through the bowl, see what happens, have a conversation at the end of the bowl game and then determine my future. And then, so you're going to see another bulge of those, and you're going to see some teams losing, players to the NFL that maybe weren't sure, but had a good bowl game or just were kind of borderline. So if you're a borderline MAC, lower level G5 guy with talent, maybe some interest, maybe there was a preferred walk-on offer from an Iowa or Illinois or Kansas State or something like that. Hold on, wait, because if Iowa, I think Iowa probably will lose another player or two after the bowl game. And then they're down to, after the transfer portal, they still have 3 or 4 open scholarships. That's where Phil has made his money, man. That's where Phil has gone out and gotten Kayvon Merriweather and Geno Stone and players like that. Their last second guys, George Kittle,
Yeah.
their last second guys have been better than most people's elite 5 stars. So, I would hang on, wait. And then, because if you're good enough for a MAC school in December, you're going to be good enough for a MAC school in February. Or, now if you're a guy that you've got one offer and it's Miami of Ohio or it's South Dakota and that's it, and you don't really have, everybody else is like, well, yeah, I guess you could walk on, then sign. Don't risk it. But I think if you got a chance where, if you're a Desmond King type, where you've got like 10, every MAC school wants you, and then you got a couple of Big Ten schools dabbling at you, I'd wait, because as you said, Rob, I think the next month is going to be not as chaotic as this month, but I think it's got a chance to have some real, flexibility for a lot of players.
Yeah, no doubt. Recruiting does not sleep. Never. Want to let folks know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That's sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited and all of our sponsors. We're going to hear from a few more now, and Scott and I will be back on the other side to give you the back half of this podcast. And we are back. Thank you to our sponsors. We appreciate their support of the podcast that we're able to bring to you guys 5 days a week. The Hawkeye Hotspot is here on Thursdays. We've got a mailbag on Tuesday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the flagship Hawk Fanatic podcast. So we've got something fresh for you every business day of the week. And we have some weekend podcasts too when we have the Rapid Reaction podcast. And we'll have one of those after the bowl game with Jordan Canzeri and Jovan Johnson. And we're working on potentially getting maybe a semi-regular basketball reaction show with a former Hawkeye or two basketball player once we get past football and we're focused mainly on basketball. Although in January, as we just spoke about, we could certainly be focused on football recruiting as well. It's always going to be busy. We'll table the preview of the Music City Bowl maybe we'll have to see. Scott's going down to Nashville that the Thursday right before the game. We'll see if we can slip something in there or sometime that week, and we'll preview the game then, because I want to wait till we get close to the game so we know everybody who's playing and have a better idea of what that's going to look like. And then, as I said, we'll do our Festivus show next Thursday, and we'll have some basketball to talk about next week as well. Although Iowa is on finals week break this week, so we haven't. Scott and I were at the games Thursday and Sunday. Iowa State win. Disappointing overtime loss to Wisconsin. Fran McCaffrey was on with Anthony Herron on the Sirius show yesterday, the Big Ten show, and he indicated that Chris Murray would be out a couple more weeks. And I think it lines up pretty well, Scott, in terms of what the schedule looked like. I think SEMO is next, and then Eastern Illinois?
Yeah. They've got two teams that are just not going to be
Saturday and Wednesday of next week.
Yeah.
This Saturday and then Wednesday. So, and then they get back into Big Ten play with Nebraska on 29th, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't have it in front of me, but those are the next three games. And I think it's smart to get Chris fully healthy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you do not want to jeopardize or further injure him. I mean, if you let him heal as long as he can, and even if you got to take an L, to Nebraska or something like that, that's okay. You'll survive that. But what you don't want to do is rush him back, and then all of a sudden it becomes a lingering factor, and you lose a lot of close games because he's not full strength. So you could suck it up and lose or play hard, because they do open Big Ten play with 2 road games. Reopen it up, I should say, Nebraska and at Penn State, and that could be a challenge, no question. But they're all pretty tough teams these days. So,
And then Purdue comes on the 5th, right?
Indiana.
Oh, Indiana. I knew it was one of those Indiana schools that are very good.
Yeah. And then you're at Rutgers. They're pretty good. I mean, Maryland or Michigan and Maryland then. And so you've got a lot of different teams coming into play. It's not going to be easy. And the Big Ten is going to be a grind as much as ever, because if nothing else, the bottom isn't so bad as it used to be, So But, in watching the games last week, I thought I was really impressed with the way that they played against Iowa State, taking a 15-0 lead, 20-2 lead, just the manner in which they dictated the game, the whole part of the game, and didn't let up and were physical and played great defense, which I think has always been a rarity for Iowa. And then also hit shots and just did it without Chris Murray. I thought that was really impressive. And I think against Wisconsin, they were just too depleted, both with Murray and Aaron Eulis out. It just, Peyton Sanford is struggling a lot. And the only way to really get out of that is to shoot your way out in some ways. And, he's trying. He was there. I saw him 2 hours before tip out there with Matt Gatens shooting, trying to but as you know, in a skill sport like this, if you're not hitting, it's mental. And that's kind of the case where you think you got it, but then the basket looks so small, whereas other times it looks really big.
Yeah, I thought he might break out of the slump a little bit. He hit some mid-range stuff one of the days last week, and then just cannot get consistency with his shot. He is pressing a little bit. You can see some of it is forced, and you can see reactions on his face when he misses the shot. You could see the disappointment on his face, and it has a tendency to snowball. Matt Gatens went through that when he was here, so he can certainly relay and translate to those guys kind of the mental part of it, but we've seen Bohannon go through it. The good shooters go through it. It's just, it's the nature of the game, and Peyton will get his stroke back at some point. I've been impressed with, and I think it's Matt, as far as I know, it's Matt Gatens that's helped Connor McCaffrey with his shot. His shot looks so much better than it has, and it's effective. He's making shots, which is the most important thing, but it looks better, more arc on it. And he's been, he and Patrick have been playing really good. They had a really good week last week for the most part. And it's nice to see. We talked about it before, Scott, but it's pretty nice to have an older guy like Connor McCaffrey. You lose Chris Murray, to be able to put him into the starting lineup, and he guards 5 positions, which goes under. I love watching Connor play defense. It's amazing to watch. He'll play a point guard, and then the next trip down, he's playing the center. So fun to watch.
Yeah, he's always been that floor general, coach on the floor type. But, to see now that he's healthy, he's had, the hip surgeries last year, shoulder issues in the past that have really hurt him. I think shooting the ball, and not only that, but just getting his whole body into his shot, that now he's, more arc, as he said, it's not as flat as some of his outside shots as were before. And he and Patrick combined for 68 points in that 2-game stretch. I think they had 41 on Sunday against Wisconsin. They are taking steps forward, and it's really neat to see. And Connor is, we've seen there's been some really good players at Iowa who are going to make exceptional coaches. Matt Gatens, I think, is on that fast track. Jeff Warner certainly is. Dean Oliver, who coached against Iowa the other day, and the list is, on and on. Connor McCaffrey will be a head coach at a high-level institution, and he will be a successful one. He may even win a Final Four. He has every single intangible gift you want, along with the tangibles and the just, I think there would be a market for him, an NIL market, to be a grad assistant, at some point, because I just think he sees the game at a level that I've never seen from anybody at this stage of their career. So he is performing it, in a way that I think really is helpful. Now, they've got 2 more games to kind of play around with, SEMO and Eastern Illinois. That's what they're there for. No need to complain about it. They're there to win. They're there to work through some things and probably try to get some guys some minutes. I think you might want to get Josh Agundale even a few more minutes, because you're going to need him in Big Ten play, because you don't want to wear out Philip Rebraca. And you're going to have to try to get Peyton Sanford on track. He's capable. We all know he's capable of having some big moments. He's had them before, but you just need to make sure that he gets off his slump in the next couple of games. So then he's able to do that. Because even when Chris Murray does return with a foot injury, it's not exactly like you can go out there and play 40 minutes. Your feet are a little different than other parts of your body that you kind of ignore.
Yeah, that Chris right now is probably limited, or definitely limited in what he's able to do. He probably can shoot maybe a little bit, but cardio wise, he's shut down, and it's going to make it more, it's going to take a little bit for him to get back on there. And since Ari Gold in the chat room, the two boomers that don't read the chat, he took a shot at us, and I fit that description. I guess I am a boomer or an old dude or whatever. And I said that we do read the chat, Ari. And then Ari said he's left comments in the chat room in the past shows and we don't read the chat. No, I read the chat, Ari. It's hard for me to respond to the chat while I'm recording a podcast. The chat room is for you guys to converse. If you have a question in there, I'll try to get to it and I can answer it on the podcast, or Scott will answer it. But we are reading the chat. It's just hard for us to chat and pod at the same time. So There's your answer. That's why I didn't answer your question on the chat. In the chat, I answered it on the podcast. So there you go. So 1-2 last week for the men's team. That not ideal, not what you want, but I almost say Duke, the Duke game. It's Duke in New York. The Wisconsin game, I never put a ton of stock in because it's such a different style. And if Wisconsin is allowed to grab and clutch and restrict movement on a team like Iowa, it's difficult to win. I'm not blaming the officials. It's just the way certain teams play in this conference, Michigan State, where you do it so much, you grab and clutch and hold and restrict movement that the referees can't call it all. They call some, but they can't call it all. And Iowa's had a trouble with Wisconsin being able to combat that, Michigan State as well. But I didn't look at Sunday's game and say, oh crap, Iowa's in trouble. It was an Iowa-Wisconsin game.
If Iowa would have had Ulis and Chris Murray, I think I would have probably been more concerned. But starting out without those two, two of your starters,
Ulis has played well. He's gotten a lot better, and his shot looks better too. Matt Gatens gets a hat tip there.
Yeah, I think in some ways you just look at, that was Asante Bowen's first start, and you could tell. I think he's got a lot of potential, but you could tell. And so the younger players were struggling a little bit, and they didn't have, a couple of big pieces. So, the fact that they got it to overtime, it was an exciting game. I think everybody played hard, and which is fun to see. I think both teams were kind of wailing on each other in overtime, hitting shots, and that's kind of, it's entertainment most of all. But what I'm trying to do with this team right now is look at it holistically over its 6-game stretch, where it plays 6 power 5 power opponents. They're 3-3. They lost to TCU kind of decisively. They lost to Duke decisively, and they lost in overtime to Wisconsin. Now that one's a little bit of an issue just because it's at home and it's a conference game and a rival. But I thought that their wins over Georgia Tech and Iowa State were really impressive. Clemson, they got through it. They won. So they're right where they probably should be, which is mid-pack of the Big Ten. They've got some areas of deficiency that we know about. I think Philip Rebraca has played better than I expected. I think he's really played well. And I think when you take away one of the best players in the Big Ten, this team is going to struggle to compensate for that. And that's kind of where they are right now. And, they've got 2 more wins to get through. Then, this Big Ten is going to be, again, with teams like initially you look at, at Nebraska, at Penn State, you're thinking, okay, you got a chance to kind of get through this. No, they got 3 out of their first 4 on the road. And after Indiana at home, which is Indiana is one of the best teams in the league, then at Rutgers, that's not an easy trip either. So it's going to take a lot to get through this. And they may still be a pretty good team, but the record may not reflect anything more than just mid-level.
Penn State's good. They shoot the heck out of the ball. I like him as a coach. I think he's got them going in the right direction. Nebraska is still inconsistent, but did beat Creighton. Rutgers beat Indiana at home.
Penn State beat Illinois.
Yeah, Penn State beat Illinois on the road. I mean, it's going to be a gauntlet, no doubt. Iowa should be 9-3, headed back into Big Ten play if it wins the next two. Iowa is currently 37th in the NCAA's net rankings right now. 1-1 in the quad 1 games, 1-2 in quad 2 games, 2-0 in quad 3 games, 3-0 in quad 4 games. If you follow the net rankings. So not bad, kind of right in there. Going to have work to do in the Big Ten, but you always have work to do in the Big Ten. And the good thing about playing in this conference, Scott, you get opportunities every night to play a team that can help your RPI or your net rankings most nights.
Yeah, right. Other than Northwestern, I think they're in pretty good shape there.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened in Evanston.
I haven't been there since the new arena's been.
I haven't either.
Christened, but you wonder how much longer they could take that. I mean, I know they really like Chris Collins, but you can only live on that first tournament for so long, and then it's time to move on. And you're in a prime recruiting area, and they should be better than what they are.
I just think Northwestern basketball and football has fallen back to the old depths of despair.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and I certainly know Fitz is a great coach.
Yes.
Chris Collins has done a nice job, but at some point you got to take that step forward and be competitive year in and year out. Not necessarily in the tournament every year, but you certainly got to be competitive for the tournament or the NIT on an annual basis, and they're not. But the tough part is for Iowa, if this thing with Chris Murray lingers, you're playing teams where you might lose by 4 to 5 points every night. And even though you're just as good as they are, but it does take players to win games. You can say next man in all you want, but there aren't very many Chris Murrays in college basketball, and certainly not in the Big Ten. So, and you'll need them because, the things that kind of pop up, although one of the off-season guys, Amiak or whatever that is available again. So, but their post play is going to be, they have to compensate for that. And because again, Rebraka is going to get worn down. He's going to get in foul trouble at some point, and you're going to have somebody like a Gundele step in, or it could be a really tough go at times.
Yeah, no doubt. There's always big players in the Big Ten that cause problems. Zach Edey is another guy we talked about, guys that have gotten better since last year, and Connor McCaffrey and Aaron Eulis for Iowa. Man, I didn't know if Zach Edey could get here, but Matt Painter is, he is good at developing these guys because Edey is dominant right now.
Yeah, Purdue to me is kind of like Iowa football. And Purdue basketball, because I think Painter is an outstanding coach. He's a great developer. He has a scheme and a style that he coaches to. And generally they're, every now and then they'll kind of fall back, but generally they are a very competitive team, and it's certainly a tough out. And so I think this is indicative of him, and lucky for Iowa, they only play Purdue once, and it's over there. So now granted, they'd struggled against it for a while, and then they won the Big Ten tournament against Purdue last year. But I think, overall they
lose Travion Williams and Jaden Ivey, and they're still kick ass. I mean, that's a heck of a program. Yeah. Number one.
Yeah. So, that's the thing with this league. I mean, it's just, I usually, kind of almost roll my eyes because I hear it every year. Oh yeah, we're the best league in the country. But, the best league in the country doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to win the national title or get 3 teams to the Final Four. But what it means is the team 14 is good enough to really hang with teams 2, 3, and 4, or in this case, probably team 13 is that good, which means that you go on the road and you're playing Nebraska and you're thinking, okay, you should be able to, even if you have a rough night, you still should be able to win by 8 and move on. You're like, oh crap, we can't do that. You can't play bad and lose. You're going to lose. So they're going to lose some games in the Big Ten, folks. They're going to lose a few games decisively. And they might even lose a game or two in February, and it's not considered a fade. But you're just going to have to ride it, because if you can get through this, and if Iowa can win 11, 12 games, even in the Big Ten, they're going to be a damn dangerous team in the tournament. They might actually get to the Sweet 16. So I think you're going to have some patience and not as many knee-jerk reactions. And I know it's like tell my cat to get down out of the Christmas tree, but it's the same thing.
Iowa women are 2-0 in the Big Ten. Wins against Wisconsin, and then they beat Minnesota on Saturday night, I believe it was, at Carver Hawkeye Arena. We talked last week in last week's pod about the win against Iowa State on Wednesday. So Iowa gets the winner sweep, at least in terms of wrestling, women's and men's basketball, over Iowa State. The women have the Girl Scout game this Sunday, Scott, 2:00, Northern Iowa. Yes, the women still do play Northern Iowa and Drake, and Northern Iowa comes to Carver on Sunday. The Hawkeyes are currently 13th in the net rankings, so in good position there. I think this team's going to be better for the difficult schedule that it's played early in the season, and I don't worry about the losses that it has to this point, because I think it's gearing up for March, which it needs to do. It learned some lessons last year in March. And I think they've got the focus where it needs to be right now. They have, arguably the best player in the country. And so they will have UNI this Sunday, December 18th. That's a 2:00 start. Then Wednesday, December the 21st, a 2:00 Wednesday game, the holiday sweater game against Dartmouth at Carver Hawkeye Arena. And then Thursday, December 29th, back into Big Ten play. Purdue comes to Iowa City. So the women's team are in good. I think it's in good shape right now, and I think it's kind of worked through some I don't know, some issues. I don't even know if issues is the right word, but just kind of figured some things out here in the non-conference and early Big Ten season, and is poised to because the Big Ten is loaded, man. It's better than it's been in a while. There's some good teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah, there are. There's a lot of them. And I think in some ways it's having these tests, as you said, I think that's really going to help this team through the course of this Big Ten season and then into March, because I think what we learned with Drake is it can't just step on the floor and expect to win without competing. And it won in overtime on the road in an environment where, they need to realize every team is going to give them their best shot. And in Kansas State confirmed that. Again, they lost by 1 point. UConn game was very competitive. They show they need to push a little bit more in the latter stages of the game. And NC State, they needed to learn how to play defense in that game, because every time that they would make a run, and Caitlin Clark scored 45 points. Every time they would make a run, NC State would score every single freaking time. And so you've got to learn, you got to do something differently. And I think they did. And they learned something against Iowa State, which was even when they don't have it, they still compete. And, the other team didn't either. And then in the second half, they were able to kind of get on track and still play defense. So all these games really will help build that mosaic of the season. So when they get to that point of playing Indiana and Maryland back-to-back to finish the season, then the Big Ten tournament, then the NCAA at home, because I think they're that good, and get into potentially the Sweet 16 against a really good team, all these experiences could help them push forward. And so, Kate Martin, I don't know what her status will be going, that was a tough bone bruise, I think it was, on her shin, but those are painful and inhibiting. So, but I do love the fact, as you said, they're playing Northern Iowa. And, that the one thing about the men's team, they've taken away a lot from the fans and they haven't given a lot back. No more PTL. That was an opportunity, whether you liked it or didn't. But there was an opportunity for fans to watch some of the players, the new ones.
There were times that I liked it and times that I didn't.
I liked the first game. And after that, it was a work, but
No, but you're right. It was good to see, especially the new guys. You get your first real look at the new guys.
Yeah. Remember shirts and skins before games, football games. That was an opportunity for fans to watch them. Playing the in-state teams home and away. It was a game. Those were games where fans paid attention. They watched them, whether it was on, their local TV, stations back in the day or BTN or whatever. But hey, they're playing you and I. That's a game that fans watched, and then there were rivalries attached to them because some of them played together in AAU, some played against each other in high school. I'm glad the women at least do that because it does provide, some sort of semblance and a gate too. Because, when we see Iowa playing Omaha in men's basketball and you can hear the ball echo in the rafters, you may want to consider, hey, maybe we should get Drake back on the schedule. Just a thought. But anyway, that's my soapbox for the day on basketball.
Yeah, it would be nice. And we're going to follow the Iowa men's basketball attendance moving forward. There were some empty seats against Wisconsin that surprised me a little bit. Sunday night, 5:30. I know there's always excuses, but we'll see where that goes. Just to finish up on the women, Scott, UConn is 6th in the net. NC State is 7th in the net. The Kansas State loss, that one was not good. 44th, Kansas State is in the net, although it is 9-2. It just hasn't really played anybody other than Iowa, which is why it's down there. But no egregious losses on the women's schedule. So still control destiny, get into that area where you can host the first 2 rounds and go from there. Wrestling side, we'll finish up with that. Iowa went to Chattanooga last weekend, so had a team down in Tennessee early in the month, waiting for one later in the month, but won that one handily at Chattanooga. Has the Soldier Salute. That is at Extreme Arena on Thursday the 29th, Friday the 30th. Go check that out. I'm sure tickets are still available for that tournament. And then hop into Big Ten play on Friday, January 6th against Illinois. But traditionally kind of a slower kind of time of year for wrestling with, finals going on. And, they kind of front load the schedule, then kind of taper it a little bit in December and then hop back in January.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the interesting part of wrestling is, there used to be the Midlands tournament was kind of a big deal over Christmas break, and now it's no longer there. So I don't know if this kind of fills that vacuum or not. But there was an interesting piece of news this morning, and that's the UFC is becoming a sponsor of the men's and women's wrestling teams. And I think that's at Iowa. Yeah, not everywhere, just Iowa. But I think this is it's a perfect fit because I think you're seeing athletes that'll continue to compete at that level, mixed martial arts. And Iowa has a huge brand in the sport, not just Terry and Tom, so so this is something that they can partner up and really be a mutually beneficial relationship. So I think this is a really good for the program. And and then wrestling will kind of get back into focus in January. So I'm anxious to see how Spencer Lee competes. I mean, his match at home a couple weeks ago, he started out like he always does. And then the last 2 minutes, he was just like, I got to get this thing over with. So, but it's been a while since he competed in a real match.
No doubt. And it'll be interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about the Soldier Salute as it gets closer. It's a kind of a neat event that people might want to check out if they're wrestling fans and in the area, not going to the bowl game. Nice local event. Extreme Arena is doing a heck of a job with hosting events and putting on events. I'm over there 4 or 5 times a week, dropping my kids off at practices over in the other part of the arena where they have practice courts over there. Did a great job with state volleyball, and I'm sure we'll do a really good job with the girls' state wrestling. Already have. So kudos to them for doing some nice things in Coralville and bringing some people to town, bringing some dollars to the area.
I really like it because I think there's just so many possibilities what it does, and I've been over there for hockey too. And that's really kind of fun to watch. I don't know how that growth is going to happen there. That's kind of a challenge, but I think there's some ways where even you could have like classics, like women's basketball classic or something on a weekend. I know the volleyball team competed there. I think there's some real interesting opportunities. Maybe the men's basketball team does that some night where they're playing, I don't know, just anybody, you could. Now, I don't know what the pay would be or, how they'd have to rent it or whatever. But you think about like next Wednesday's 2:00 women's game. Maybe that's one of those where in the future you try to put something together like that over in Coralville as opposed to, in Carver. I don't know. I mean, I think it would be great for parking. Considering what we got over there. But, and what's interesting for us, Rob, is that's the day where we have that's where we have signing day. So I don't know how many people are going to be able to go to the basketball game and signing day press conferences on that.
Yeah, that's going to be a crazy. It's kind of everything's jammed into next week, so we'll see how that all plays out. Because you got signing day, and then you've got bowl press conferences and all the other good stuff that's going on. And basketball will get back into action here, both men and women this weekend at Carver Hawkeye Arena. The men on Saturday night, the women on Sunday afternoon. So a little bit of a down week this week in terms of live action, but we'll kick it back into gear this weekend. And Scott and I will be back. I always ask Scott, did I forget anything? Because he's the organizer here. Did I forget anything in this podcast?
No, but I think one thing that's just interesting that popped up is that Drew Brees will be an assistant coach for Purdue Boilermakers in their bowl game.
Wow.
So, yeah. So anyway, I think that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what Ryan Walters is able to do there. You go from an extreme offensive coach to an extreme defensive coach. And I watched his interview with Dave Revson on the Big Ten Network yesterday, and he seems like a really sharp guy and has an idea of what he wants to do from an offensive perspective. I thought it was interesting. He said, as a defensive coordinator, I know what offenses can do to make me uncomfortable as a defensive coordinator, and I'm looking for an offensive coordinator that can do that and an offense that does that. So it's a good approach. I thought it was a good answer.
Yeah, I think so too. And, he's a younger guy. He's in his mid-30s, so he's hasn't had a lot of experience, but he's had enough experience. And I really liked watching his video. His first thing he did as a head coach, which was he ended up, putting Devin Mockabee on scholarship, which if anybody watched him play, that was totally deserved. I don't know, probably the best non-scholarship player in the country this year, but, maybe other than Iowa's kicker, right? But no, I think it's really going to be interesting to see which coaches really take that step forward in the Big Ten West. And it's kind of to go full circle. I mean, this upcoming year will be the last year for the Big Ten West, but those three will be somewhat compared to one another. Matt Rule, Luke Fickell, and now Ryan Walters. And how do they contend with one another? How do they compete recruiting wise with one another? And then what kind of level of success they have in the new look Big Ten against the older standbys, Pat Fitzgerald and Kirk Ferentz, and PJ Fleck is getting in that category. And Bielema's not really, he's kind of in the middle, I suppose. But yeah, I liked what I heard from Ryan Walters. I talked to him about a month ago, maybe a little more than a month ago, but we were doing kind of our All-American teams to try to pecking order, if you will, of some of his defensive players and their strengths and stuff. And I was impressed by what I heard from him then. So he's got the goods, but as we know, a lot of coaches have the goods. Can they actually go out and recruit and play to that, and then be lucky enough with schedule, with injuries to execute it and have multiple good years, because Ferentz has done that. The other ones, even Fitzgerald hasn't. So I think that's we'll see what happens.
Yep. Should be a fun year next year in the Big Ten West, likely the last year of the division, but get new guys, new blood in the division, guys with pretty good track records, and see where we go from there. Scott and I will be back next Thursday for our Festivus episode, and also catch up on any goings on in Iowa athletics. And there are always goings on in Iowa athletics to talk about. And we'll be back next week to talk about that. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to our sponsors. We'll be back to talk to you next week on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Say goodbye, Scott.